Hello and welcome, everybody. Welcome back to Flourish. This is our conversation on authentic gospel living. Flourish is a new blog that we've started here at Fellowship, a way for us to converse and chat and share along the idea of what it means to flourish in our discipling lives in the up, down, in and out directions. And so the blog also has this weekly video feature, and I was so sorry to miss being with you all last week. I had some things on my schedule that I couldn't rearrange, but I'm happy to be back and glad to be back with you today. Thanks so much for joining in. If you're able to join here during the lunch hour, just go ahead and interact with us, say hello online so that we know you're there, and we want to allow a little bit of time for us to think together as we engage this conversation about what it means to authentically live gospel lives together. My hope is each time we get together, there's something that you take away from our conversation that is helpful to you and your discipleship to Jesus. I hope you're well today. I hope folks are virus-free today. You may recognize this face with me here. This is Becky Banker. I'm going to give her the official introduction in just a second, but okay. I know you've been keeping us up to date and with people that we know who are part of our fellowship of body, who are testing positive and experiencing the virus. Fortunately, most people are who we know who have had relatively mild symptoms, but so
it's hard. We've got, I think, 9 or 10 families right now that are part of their family, or everybody in their household is dealing with COVID. So it's an interesting time for sure.
It's a big deal. So hello to you, Sarah and Veronica. Glad that you are joining us today. Hello. We miss seeing you regularly, Sarah, but glad that you are connected. So again, as you just log on to us, we just want to spend maybe the next 20 or 30 minutes together, engaged together in a conversation. So we are glad that you are here. My guest today is no stranger to most of you at Fellowship. Becky Banker is our Director of Care and kind of our social service ministries. Together, you've been doing that for an awfully long time now.
16 years.
16 years. I remember when you started. And Becky, tell us, for those of us who don't know, what does your day-to-day job entail, and what do you love most about it?
That's a very easy question to answer. I get the privilege of working with an amazing team, Rochelle Grinowig, who oversees our counseling ministry, Emma Irvin, who oversees our benevolence portion of what we do, and Debbie Clausen, who holds us really all together. But we get the privilege of offering any kind of care, so anything from emotional support to looking back at kind of hard parts of your life towards the care ministry, so visitation and helping people through this COVID situation. Those are all the things that our team is responsible for. What I love the most is probably empowering the body to care for one another. And we have an amazing group of people here at Fellowship, but I love helping people identify their gifts and then being able to provide care to the Fellowship community.
Well, it's interesting when you think about what you love doing. In short, it sounds like you love loving on people and seeing other people love on people. There's definitely a shepherd heart there. And so I see Megan has joined us, also Patricia Ross.
Hi, Trish.
Megan. Welcome. Glad you guys are here. So what we want to talk about today, a topic for today and over the course of the next 4 weeks, I want to engage you with some ways that we are talking about the values that are increasingly driving our mission here at Fellowship, and talk about 4 statements in the upcoming weeks. Everyone loved, everyone reconciled, everyone empowered, and everyone sent. And we kind of want to unpack what we mean when we talk about these statements. And so the first one has to do with everyone loved. So let me just engage everybody who is online currently and who will watch this later as well with this question, because this is a conversation we want to be having together. When you think about fellowship, your family at fellowship, do you think fellowship loves well? Do you think we're good and getting better at loving? And what would be an indicator for you? Like when you think about, do we love well? Are we good at loving one another? What would be an indicator that would suggest maybe not so much, or maybe yes, we're growing in that area? So what are some indicators? And I invite you to give that a little bit of a think, and then offer some responses via the chat so that we can be having this conversation together. And while you're thinking and reflecting and writing, I'll just toss that question to you, Beck. You've been here 16 years, and part of your role is to ensure that love and care is multiplied here. How would you assess, is fellowship a particularly loving church community in your view?
Yeah. I think when I talk to people that are fairly new to fellowship, one of the first things they talk about is just that part of who we are. That when they come in, there's a sense of welcome, which is, for me, a sense of love that just says, we are really glad you're here. And I'm really proud of the fact that people come in and feel that immediately. I get to see, and we're in the middle of it right now with COVID, of tens of people jumping in and helping provide food for families that are in need. And so I think it's something we're always going to have to grow in as we bring new people into the church. Like, we've got to continue to help them understand this value. But yeah, I think on the scale we're on the high end for sure.
Yeah, and I see some of you are offering some comments, and we'll get to those comments in just a second. But as we think about this value phrase, this value proposition that says the thing that drives us is that everyone is loved. Why is that critical in your view? And you were part of the team, as was kind of the core leaders, both elders and staff and others. In 2019, we went through almost a 9-month process of trying to articulate God's dream for fellowship in the next 10 years, and the sort of values that drive that. There's many things that we value, and some of them even go without saying. But why do you think it's critical that we talk explicitly about love?
I know that it's the thing that drives me, the love of God and love of people. But love actually is just the core of our faith. First John talks about God is love. And so if we're going to live like him, we have to learn how to embody love. And so when I'm thinking about mission and the things that I'm called to do in our community, that I'm responsible to lead out on, if I don't have love, it will not get accomplished. So as God empowers, and as I receive his love and then extend that out, it is the motivator, that value of living on mission for me personally. And I believe that that's true for us as a body. And so,
right.
Yeah, that's
well, you pointed the kind of the biblical foundation of that. God is love, and I think about passages like Matthew chapter 22, 36 and 40, and we've been talking about that over the last couple months. It's essentially where Jesus says, look, you can boil it all down to this: love God and love your neighbor as yourself. And the 4 directions, up, down, in, and out, kind of fall from that command to love one another. And Genesis chapter 1, 26 and 27, where it's declared that we who exist as human beings are all made in the image of God. Anybody who's ever been has been created in the image of God, which means there is a worth there to be seen and respected and loved. Talk to me more about that. Why does that drive? Like, is that what we're going after? That everyone is worthy of love, no matter who they are, where they come from, what they've done?
And I praise God for that, because that's my story. While we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. While we were not worthy in the world's eyes, God gave His own Son for us. And I think, I want to come back to your question about the idea of why we would even want to spend some time on Everyone Loved, because it does feel like kind of a given. I mean, God is love. We know that. Love is hard. Love is not easy. How that plays out is really complicated. I think we'll talk some about those complications, but I think there's a lot to learn about how to love, different than just saying we are a loving community, but we've got to learn and practice. Yeah. This is a practice that we have to do, and so there's a value for me in that as well. So,
well, and you mentioned how it's so critical that this is the way God has loved us, and that's what's so difficult, to love your neighbor as the Lord loves us, right? And 1 John 4:19 goes on to say that it's not that we loved God. It's that He loved us first. Right. It's that first kind of love.
Right.
And what that means is that love is unconditional. There isn't any string attached, but when we experience that love, it draws us into a transformative relationship.
Yeah. I'm thinking about, and I taught and shared this story a while back about my neighbor Liz, but she was not an easy person to love. Like, there wasn't just a natural, I love everybody, so therefore I love her. I shared this too, that there were times when she would knock on my door and I just didn't answer, which is a terrible thing to say, but God had to grow.
You're gonna have to turn in your pastoral credentials.
I know, right? But yeah, as new ways, he actually brought that love in my heart for her. And so love for me even ended up being a evangelistic tool. That, for a shepherd, is probably the way I'm going to invite people to know Him, is first through love.
Right.
Because that's my bent. And
so love is so foundational to our community, and yet it's not easy to do well and to keep growing in that. And we'll talk about some of the challenges in just a second, but I wanted to draw in Megan and Sarah, Trish, and some others who were responding. Sarah, thanks for thinking that's a great question. I'm just wondering what your answer is, sis. Just go ahead and give me your answer. But she says those who love well, it shows through their actions, and that's what it comes down to. It's an embodied thing. It's not a theoretical thing. It's a very intensely practical dimension.
Yeah, we think about often. I think it's like over 100 times that the scriptures talk about one anothering. Serving one another, loving one another, teaching one another, encouraging one another. Like, the scriptures are full of ways that we are called to love each other. And it requires something of us. It requires a death and a cost.
It's serving one another. So this season of COVID is one of those, there's lots of opportunity to love, and maybe you can share about ideas that you've had that we've tried to do, and some ideas probably we haven't yet tried to do, but they're emblematic of the love. And Trish talks about being grateful for the body of Christ at FMC, and you do feel loved. And I think for so many of us, when life gets hard, that's when we feel that expression of love, like meals, or there's a crisis and somebody comes around, and one dimension, an indicator of love, right?
And it's a huge piece, because for any of us, when things get hard, that isolation piece is often the thing that the enemy uses to even make things more difficult. We tend to shrink back just because, one, if you're sick, you're not going to pursue people. But emotionally, there's so many things that go into seasons of hardship, whether that's a loss or sickness or marital struggle or whatever. And so for us to be so intentional is so critical. And I loved, like, when COVID hit, we were clueless about we hadn't planned for this kind of thing, but just felt like I remember the exact moment where God just kind of brought together, was we were praying as a staff for God, what would you have us do to respond to this and care for our people? And the idea of the medically vulnerable and those who are providing health care, and the elderly, just the system kind of came into play. And within really 2 weeks, we had all those people adopted, that somebody was praying their name and encouraging them with cards. Within a short amount of time, the body just stepped up. And I've heard from people, I've seen the relationships built through that, people that didn't know one another, that have been praying for one another. I got the privilege one Sunday to watch 2 of those folks meet. Pat Ford was meeting the gal that she'd been praying for, and it was such a beautiful moment of expression. And this gal that works in the healthcare field said, yeah, I told my coworkers, I don't even know this woman, and I'm getting cards from her, and I know she's praying for me. And the power of that is so beautiful. And then we got to the place where we went, boy, we've taken care of this group of people, and thought everybody is loved. Everybody needs to know they're cared for in this season. We've not been through this before. And so we empowered the body again, and most people had somebody praying their name and encouraging them throughout. So there's so many ways.
And I'll just say that as Tammy just Christ together, then everybody has an obligation to grow in their ability to love one another. And if we're all doing that, then everybody's needs get met.
That's right. There's plenty.
If it's just on the pastor to love everybody well, then nobody's going to get loved nearly as well as they need, because it's the body loving the body and growing in that, isn't it?
And I can tell you that it will be worth the cost. You may not see it every time, but I can tell you those people that step into that kind of intention feel the blessing of the Lord, because we are doing what He's called us and to do and be. And I think part of it is just sometimes people aren't aware of a need, and so you don't know how to do it. And Tammy, you'll hear this now. I haven't got to call and tell you this, but Tammy's mom just got out of the hospital with COVID, and she had a lot of other issues going on. So it was scary. So it is a miracle, Tammy, and we rejoice with you in that. But her mom lives between Roanoke and Huntington, and we want to support her because Tammy can't go and help her. And so I knew of 3 or 4 families that lived out that way. So I emailed them this morning and said, hey, is there any way you could support Tammy's mom? And we've got a meal plan for the next week. So those gals are, because of proximity, it's a natural for them to be the ones to serve. But it only took an ask, and people are willing. And so sometimes it's just a matter of knowing what those opportunities are. So I just say that because if your heart is to be a part of something, to support a family right now, please just let me know, because I may not call you or think to email you, but there's a place for everybody in this season for sure.
Yeah, and Liz Walmsley, you're on point, spot on with your comment that choosing to trust God as our comforter enables us to provide that same comfort and love to others. That's if we're loving God, then we have what we need to reach out and love others, and that's the way it's designed, right? Because everyone's worthy and deserving of that love. And Megan, thanks for your honesty and transparency here. I just found out that you had tested positive earlier today too, and there's so many, and we're just going to go through this surge, and we're gonna navigate it together, and it's an opportunity for us to express love and to express care. So you mentioned something earlier, Beck, that I thought was important. You talked about not only is it loving internally, loving on the in, those who are believers, absolutely yes, we love, but this growing to be better lovers of people actually has an out dimension to it as well. It's about mission. And that makes me think about, how do we love like Jesus loved us? And what about sin and holiness? Because I've been around long enough that there's this natural tendency, and it's not a bad tendency, to, when we're talking about loving well and loving people, people will say, yeah, but this phrase of loving the person but hating the sin. If somebody is in a sinful behavior, what does love require? at that point? There's a tendency to think that if you're really out to love everybody, then anything goes.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, what's true is holiness and love are not at odds with each other. They're actually the same. And I think about my own story of, living in this pattern of sin. And, there were lots of people that loved me on that journey before I broke. And I'm grateful that they didn't leave me in that, because I don't know that when push came to shove and I was confronted, so that point of having to actually look at myself, when that became evident, I relied on that history of love from those people to make it through the next season. The kindness of God through these people allowed me then to live a different lifestyle. But I can't prescribe that for people. Like, my role is to love, and love does not mean everything goes.
And you don't mean your role at Fellowship.
No.
I think when you say that, your role as a believer in Jesus, as a disciple of His, the command for you is to love whoever's in front of you. Right.
And love doesn't mean saying yes every time. In my role doing benevolence, I have to say no a lot. But how I say no is love. There's so many examples in my own story. I mean, you know me well enough to know love of you and Steph has looked like not always just applause. It's hard, it's challenge, and there's a place for that. But when I am reminded I'm not the judge. My role is to invite, and sometimes invitation comes through kindness. Sometimes it comes through a really hard question. But I think we get confused thinking that holiness and love can't coexist, and they actually are partners in moving all of us towards being more like Jesus.
Yeah, you've told me about a phrase you read about from a Christian leader who, how did he phrase it? He said, yes, I love you, and no, you can't have your way every time.
Yeah, Dan Allender talks about, it's kind of a parenting, it's in a parenting book. He talks about the two questions kids always ask is, do you love me, and can I have my own way? And the answers are always yes and no. Yes, I love you, and no, you can't have your way. And that's, I think, how God approaches me. He has approached me that way, and I think that's how I'm called to love on people, that I always will love. I have people in all walks of life I will never turn my back on. But I will continue to invite them to something more true, and only because I know that a more true life is the most fulfilling life. It's not about calling them to something to let go because it's gonna be awful. There's more life, not less, when you let go of those things. But it's the series. When we're clinging to those things, we don't know that. We don't know that till our hands are empty, and we can allow the Lord to fill our hands with what's really good and true for us. So
it's not loving to not be able to speak truth that you're convicted about. The most loving thing we can do is love people where they're at and invite them into the truth of knowing Jesus.
And when people know that you love them, they can handle those questions. Like the context of the love and the care and their trust of that has allowed me to ask some really hard questions of people. And some people hear it and move, and some people don't.
Hear it and turn away.
I'm in a relationship with a friend that years ago we had this conversation, and now, 3 or 4 years later, we're having this conversation, and it's different now. There's movement. So who was I to say that was the time back then for her to turn? I'm not responsible for that, but I am responsible for how I love her. So
right. So this is the hard work of learning how to love. If Jesus is the model for love, who didn't make his approach in his accessibility to people dependent on whether they were keeping the law or not.
Right.
And so he responded. You think about all the snapshots of Jesus in the gospel.
Tax collectors, prostitutes.
Yeah, he demonstrated love And then where truth needed to be said, he says, go and leave your life of sin.
That's right.
But he didn't say, leave your life of sin, and then I'll treat you as worthy.
Right.
Because he loved us first.
Right.
Not that we loved him enough to get our stuff together. And that's the radical nature of saying everybody loved.
Right.
Everyone
Exactly right.
love in this way, because if we're disciples of Jesus, that's the way we have to love. We can't love any other way except the way Jesus loved us.
But we have to get out of the way in that. Like the things that trip me up, even my relationship with Liz, like I had to evaluate, what is it that's keeping me from doing that? And I had to figure out, what did I have to lay down in order to love her well? And so my learning how to love better, there's always a part of my own discipleship that's being changed. And then I get the joy of being a part of Liz coming to Christ. Well, I wouldn't have missed that for the world. I would have answered that door those 2 times if I'd have known that would have gotten her closer. But I didn't know then. I wasn't there. And so God's kindness, through my practice of love, I keep learning how to do that better.
Well, tell us about your God dream for us, those who are here online with us, for the fellowship body. When you think of a family of believers loving each other like this, and I really think that's instructive what you said about that quote about from the parenting book. We're a spiritual family, and we need to learn how to treat one another this way, and it's the way of Jesus. What's your dream? What do you think it looks like in your mind as we learn to do that better?
Yeah. I think it's twofold. I think for so many of us, there are histories of trauma and pain that keep us from moving in love in the ways that God, I think, is calling us to. So I think part of the dream is for people to grow in that area, to move through that trauma and find peace and wholeness so that they can go and invite others in.
It's what Liz was saying. Experience that comfort from the Lord so that you can minister that comfort to others.
Yeah, our kind of tagline at the planting is restored to rebuild. And so I think that's the first part. So the restored ourselves, God restoring us so that we can go out and rebuild. So the second part is that we would just be a people where it attracts people that don't know Jesus, that we have people in our sphere of influence, whether it's in this building or outside, Petit Rudisol, wherever, that we would be attractive in a way that people would go, I don't know what's going on, but I want to be there. We raked leaves for folks in Petit Rudisol on Saturday, and one of the gals was so moved by the experience, she said, okay, now I need to write down, when are your services? I want to be a part of a group that will serve a community like this. And so I think for us to look really odd and like the world in this building would be awesome, because what it means is people are being drawn to know Jesus, and that.
Wasn't that what Scripture says? That's how they'll know we follow Him, is by our radical love. And I just want to encourage you, as you reflect on this, is to embrace Jesus' understanding of love, where love and holiness are not antithetical to each other. It's not. You gotta choose one or the other. No, He put them together. It was radical embrace, radical hospitality, and radical truth. He came full of grace and truth. Yeah. And there's a way. It's the harder way.
The harder way.
It's a lot easier to say, well, these parts of you are unloving, and so once you get those fixed up, we're going to have more grace for you. But that's not the way of Jesus.
Right.
And so loving like Him combines both of those. I want you to share, you offered some thoughts by way of an article that I believe posted yesterday on the blog, but you share a story. I wonder if you could just reprise that, because it's a glimpse into the power of love to transform both those who are being loved and those who are offering love. And you reminded me of a story that we've shared before. think I remember the day that happened because you came into my office and told me about it. But maybe you could just kind of conclude our time by sharing that glimpse of loving well and what you think it means for our community.
Yeah, I love it because it is a story about not only loving someone, but my own discipleship. It's a combination of that. And I had been on staff just a couple of years when, and I was doing all of our benevolence, and a couple came in. They'd actually talked to Clinton Fopple, was here on staff then, and he said, yeah, she'll be able to help you. So they came into my office, in a small office, and they just smelled terrible. You could tell that coats hadn't been washed for maybe ever. Smokers, so you had all of that smell. And so I was in this small office, just even the whole time I was talking to them going, oh wow, this is a lot. So they were looking for some assistance. They actually said, I said, what's one thing that if we could try to figure out today that you would need? And they said, well, we really could do some laundry. And in my heart, I was like, oh, you're not kidding. You know, that is the truth. And so I was able to get detergent, and I was trying to figure out how to help them with that need. And when they left, Laura's her name, Laura just reached out and hugged me, and I hugged her back. And then Richard shook my hand, and when they walked out of the room, I heard them talking to Clinton again. They said, well, did she help you? And they said, oh yeah, she was so helpful. And I was kind of proud, like, okay, great, that, you know, I did my job, I got it done. Yeah, I love them. And my next thought was, I have got to find something to wash my hands. I've got to find some perfume to cover the stench on me. Like, I was on my way to the bathroom to try to get myself cleaned up, and I just heard the Lord say, you need to stop. I was like, wait, what do you mean? And he said, yeah, he said, I called you to love, and your judgment for them, even though you did some part of helping, wasn't loving them well, and I want you to sit with that smell for a while. And so I did. I went back to my office and had a conversation with the Lord, and he said, you know, that stench that you're complaining about is actually the same smell that I have when you sin and when you're not loving in that situation. And so I felt really convicted, and you know, I didn't know if I'd ever see them again. And a few weeks later, I'm at church on a Sunday morning, and in walk Rich and Laura, and I was going to do it different. I don't think we hugged, but I was willing to without any complaining. And he came out of the service and afterwards, and he said, oh, I'm so glad I was here today. I said, I'm too. And the sermon was about God's outrageous love. And he said, just tears. He said, I just didn't know. I just didn't know I was loved that much. And I was like, okay, I didn't either, Richard. We're both learning this together. And so anyway, yeah, God just keeps using this call to love, to bless and to bless, you know, both of us. So
yeah. Well, I think that really captures the heart at what's core to this value of everyone, a part of our community, loved first and foremost for who they are, and then that love transforms them so that they don't remain
that's right
where we're at, but
right.
we're each growing in obedience and holiness because we're loved.
That's right.
Not in spite of it.
Yes.
And so thank you so much for taking some time to share with us. Everybody, your comments were so great. Glad to join this conversation with you. There's even some love going back and forth between everybody on the comment page. So God bless you for that. We're glad to share some time here today. We look forward to coming back together next week as we continue these conversations about authentic gospel living. May you flourish in your discipleship and love of the Lord more today than yesterday. We'll see you next week. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.